Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This afternoon, we are going to be sharing this presentation with you. It's called Your Students' First Year, Supporting the Transition to UCSB. So I met you all yesterday at the Welcome Assembly. I'm Suzanne Perkin, Associate Dean for Student Life. And it's really a pleasure to be here with you today. As I told you yesterday, I too was once a UCSB student. So I graduated from here in the late 90s, got my degree in biopsychology. And for those of you who aren't too familiar with biopsychology, it's the study of how physiology affects behavior. Super interesting major. I really enjoyed my time as an undergrad here, really loved the classes. Often people will ask, what does biopsychology have to do with being, a college administrator? And really the answer is very little. But that's okay, because you go to college really to learn critical thinking skills and problem solving skills, and those are the types of things that you can take with you into any possible career. So I fully support students following their passion and finding a major that really speaks to them, and knowing that all of those skills that they develop through going through their classes can actually support any possible career that they want to go into. So after I graduated from UCSB, I worked in the admissions office for about 5 years and spent my time traveling around visiting high schools and community colleges and talking to students about why they would want to come to our campus. Really enjoyed working in the admissions office here at UCSB, but after a while knew that to advance in this field, I needed to go to graduate school. So I moved abroad. I went to Ireland and I got my master's degree from Trinity College in Dublin. And then when I returned to UCSB, I went back to admissions for a short period of time, this time working more specifically with transfer students. And then soon after that, a position opened up in orientation programs. So I worked for orientation programs for about 8 years as their assistant director, associate director, and then as their acting director, before switching over to the Dean of Students office. And I've been in the Dean of Students office for quite a while now. Being an associate dean means that I have some student affairs departments who report to me: our student engagement and leadership office, our office of student conduct, our office that supports community and civic engagement, and our first year programs. So it's been quite a while at UCSB. I love the campus. I'm really excited for your students to be here. So today we're going to spend some time talking about the top issues that we see students, particularly freshmen, struggle with in their first year, and ways that you as parents, family members, their support team can really support them through that transition. And this presentation is really based off of the work of Dr. Britt Andreatta, who was a graduate student and then later professor here at UCSB. And she studied freshmen at our campus and found that the top issues that freshmen tend to struggle with
Suzanne, you're muted.
Thank you. So sorry. Let me just scoot back. Did I just get muted, Kathleen, or have I?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, perfect. I don't need to restart. Excellent. So the basis of this presentation is based off of the work of Dr. Britt Andreatta. She studied UCSB freshmen, found that these are the common concerns that come up for students: academics, financial concerns, independence and advocating for oneself, managing emotional and mental health, choices around alcohol and drug use, and fitting in and finding friends and community. So we're going to talk through each of those, share with you how we see that expressed by our students, and then ways that we can support them as parents, family members, and loved ones. So starting with academics, and I know you've heard a lot about academics already, so we won't dwell on it for too long. But some of the top issues are the time management and pace of the quarter system. So as you know, 10 weeks can move incredibly quickly. It's very different from high school, where you maybe spent the first couple of days of school getting acclimated, learning the rules of the classroom, the expectations of the teacher. Here they may share a syllabus with you, or it could already be shared on their course webpage. And then the first day of lecture, the professor is lecturing and class has started, and that material will be on the first midterm. So they need to be ready to go first day, sitting down, ready to take notes. We find that the time management issues come up even for students who have been particularly good at managing their time in high school. Getting used to this new system of only going to class, sometimes for only a couple hours a day, and then having a lot of out of class time that they have to manage, where there may not be specific assignments that have been assigned. So knowing that they just need to spend that time studying can be a new experience for many students. And we tend to see that freshmen in particular will understudy. So you probably heard that for each unit, you're supposed to spend 1 hour in class and 2 hours outside of class studying, reviewing, or doing homework. And what we tend to see with freshmen is they will spend about 1 hour out of class for every hour they spend in class. So they are understudying a little bit, and that can create some issues with their grades. So we know that this generation and this particular students who are coming to UCSB, they've really achieved academically over their time in junior high and high school. And so the experience of potentially getting their first C, or sometimes for many of them, it might even be their first B that they've ever received, can be particularly challenging. That can really push them in ways that they had not realized how they might feel about getting a grade like that. We do sometimes see a little bit of that pressure of needing to still perform at the top of the top academically, can lead to some cheating and plagiarism. So that's just something to be aware of. If you hear your student talking about feeling concerned about how they're going to get a paper done, or they forgot that there was a midterm tomorrow, something like that, reminding them that sometimes taking the lower grade can be better than taking the easy way out. And then finally, seeking support for a disability. So that's something that in high school would have been very prescribed and laid out for them. But here at UCSB, they will need to make sure that they go and they register with the Disabled Students Program and activate their accommodations. So they will need to be in charge of that for themselves. A couple of tips and suggestions that we have. Number one, really encouraging them to use a calendar. I particularly love the wall calendar, where they can list out, where they're able to see a full 10 weeks of a calendar, and then they can look at all their syllabi and they can put the dates on their calendar of when they have a midterm, when they have their finals, when they have papers due, various assignments that might come up throughout the quarter. Because one of the things that we see freshmen in particular not realize is that in a 10-week quarter, there aren't that many weeks to fit these things in. So often everything can be due at the same time on the quarter system. So they might have a midterm starting week 3, they might have another midterm week 4, maybe another midterm week 5, but sometimes it might all be jumbled together and that all of their midterms happen to be week 4, or all of their midterms happen to be week 5. And so laying it out at the beginning of the quarter using a wall calendar where they can see all 10 weeks, if they notice that that's how it's all jumbled together, they can actually plan for that. Where they tend to get into trouble is when they haven't planned for that, all of a sudden it's the beginning of week 5 and they realize I have 3 midterms this week and there's not enough time to do all the review that they need to do. This is something that you can certainly be discussing and practicing at home right now. So this is a great time between now and September when they get here, or maybe they're already here if they are doing the Freshman Summer Start program, to talk about how you manage your time, how you keep track of various different appointments or things that you have to do at work or whatever it might be. Also, really encourage your students to utilize the services of Campus Learning Assistance Services, CLAS class. I know that you heard from them either yesterday or today, and I'm sure they talked about their time management workshops that they offer. They have study skills workshops, and those are really invaluable. And they may not think they need them right away. So if they're not willing to go this first quarter, they re-offer those in winter and in spring. So they can go and sign up for those at any time. And of course, encouraging them to communicate with their instructors and communicate ahead of time. So instructors are much more likely to help them if they have been in touch early on. And like I mentioned at the beginning, encouraging them to do a major that they enjoy. It's particularly important. I think they are more invested in their education. They are more likely to get involved in research and creative activities when they're pursuing classes that they actually like and enjoy. And just remind them, if you do have that student who gets the grade that they're upset about, that their grades really don't define them. You know, they've already done the hard work to get into UCSB. They may have future goals, which of course require that they get good grades, but one bad grade is not going to define them. One bad quarter is not going to define them. They really can overcome that throughout their 4 years. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more. Some other things that you can do is share your struggles and suggestions. So, you know, over half of our students, you know, are the first in their family to go to college. So maybe this is not something that you have personal experience with, but there might be someone else, a friend or another family member who's been through it, who could share their struggles and suggestions for coping with that challenge. When you go to talk to them about their classes, it's great to ask them how they feel about the class, not just how they're doing in the class. So what are they studying? What have they found most interesting? What do they like about their professor? What do they like about the lab that they're taking? What do they dislike about it? You're going to get a lot more information, which will tell you and clue you in a little bit on how they're doing. The other thing with the quarter system and just the way that grading happens at UCSB, they often don't really know how they're doing in a class until they've at least taken that first midterm. So if you're asking early on, you know, how is your chemistry class going? You know, they may not have a lot of information to tell you, or they may feel like it's going quite well until they take that midterm and get that first bad grade back and realize, oh, it's actually not going as well as I thought. So sometimes you can get a little bit more information for them if you ask them how they feel about their classes. And then once again, if you do have a student who has a documented disability, please encourage them to register with our Disabled Students Program, send in their documentation, and activate their accommodations. Next up, money matters. So our students are very concerned about the cost of their education, about how that may impact their family, how it may impact them long-term, depending on what their financial aid situation might be, particularly if they have to take out a lot of loans to be here. So we've seen this area of concern really grow in recent years for students as the cost of higher education has increased. So one of the things that sometimes comes out of that is students spending a lot of time working an outside job while they're in college. And we encourage them to have a job. We think that that's a great thing for them to do. But we have found that when students are working over 20 hours a week, it tends to start to have a negative impact on their grades. Conversely, when they're working under 20 hours a week, it actually can improve their academics. It gives them a little bit more structure in their day, helps them to keep motivated, know that, oh, I've got to get this homework done because I'm going to have work all weekend or whatever it might be. It keeps them on a schedule. But over 20 hours a week can be detrimental to their academics. They might be experiencing new economic differences with their peers, particularly if they come from an area or a high school where most of the students were in a similar situation. This could be a new thing coming to UCSB and having a roommate who's either, a lot wealthier or a lot less wealthy than they maybe are, and figuring out how to include those peers and be sensitive to that. Sometimes we see our students get in trouble with, budgeting. They either are not budgeting their money well, or they might be relying on credit cards to make up for some of their shortfalls, and not always recognizing the impact that can have on their future financial success. So credit cards are something that we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Also, a lot of first-generation college students sometimes have the pressure of maybe working to also send money back home to support their family, or they may have responsibilities at home that they need to travel home for on the weekends to support and help their family. And that can be a source of stress for students as well. And then finally, if there's any change in financial situation at home, students tend to worry about those things. So we'll talk a little bit about how you can support them through that. So things that you can do. Number one is helping them to understand and apply for institutional and private funding sources. So the FAFSA, that free application for federal student aid, is due every year in March on the same day. So making sure that that date is on your calendar, that they know it's coming up and that they're working on it ahead of time. They might also have the option to apply for some private scholarships, and making sure that, you know, if it's possible for you to help them identify those and help them with, you know, keeping on track of the dates that they're due, that would be a great way for you to support them as well. Like I mentioned before, encouraging them to work less than 20 hours per week. Thinking about discussing their work and school balance, and this is where you can always share your own experience of your work-life balance and how you've managed that. And sometimes it's helping them see that they don't want to miss out on the experience of going to school and what they can learn from being in college by working so many hours. So when I have seen students who have had to work more than 20 hours, maybe, you know, 30 hours, we do even have some students who have had to work, you know, 40 plus hours a week. It does erode the experience that they're able to have being here at the university. They're not able to be involved in a lot of the co-curricular things that really enrich their education. Sometimes they're not able to participate in some of those academic pieces too, like joining a research lab or doing a creative project. And so helping them to understand that they somehow have to be able to find that balance to be able to really get out of UCSB everything that they can. Help them create a budget, and that's something that's going to be unique to your family, depending on the circumstances, how much they might be receiving from their financial aid, how much they might be receiving from parents or family members or grandparents, whoever might be supporting them. Or if they're not receiving any help from any outside source, figuring out how they're going to manage and setting up a budget that they can stick to over the course of each quarter can be helpful. And just so you know, if your student is ever struggling with any of their basic needs, food, housing, etc., we do have numerous basic needs resources on campus, including a food bank, a book bank, a team who could help students who need emergency short-term housing, those types of things. So please don't hesitate to encourage them to reach out and be in touch if that is something that they could benefit from. All right, let's move on and talk a little bit about independence. So this will be something that will be really, really new for many of them, even if they have been fairly independent in high school. Even in high school, if they've been fairly independent, they're still mostly living under your roof and relying on you for a number of things. So coming to college, it may be a little bit of a shock to them that they are now in charge of kind of everything, managing their time, managing their money. If they get sick, figuring out what, you know, how to take care of themselves, or maybe they need to go over to the health center and get some assistance. They will be in charge of these things on their own for the very first time. And that can be a little bit daunting for some students and pretty exciting for others. So some things to think about that we have noticed freshmen struggle with. One thing is that piece of going from the kind of safety, security, very prescribed set schedule of high school to going to college where it's a little bit more free flowing in terms of their schedule and the things that they need to do. They're also going from being the seniors, rulers of the school, to now being the little fish in a really big pond. And when we talked about academics earlier, they're also struggling with, you know, they used to be, for most of them, probably at the very top of their class academically. Now they're being thrown into, everyone who comes here has been at the top of their class academically. So that can make them feel as well kind of like the little fish in the big pond. Some of your students may struggle with homesickness. They may have some really strong new emotions they haven't experienced. This might be the first time that they're living with others. You know, they're living with people who are not family and who don't have to love them, right? And that's a different experience than living with folks who are your flesh and blood, who have an obligation to love you and accept you. So that could be a new thing. For many of them, the idea of being treated as an adult and the reality that the university will treat them as an adult and expect them to behave and be able to manage life in an adult manner can be a really, really big thing. And back when I used to work in orientation, I will never forget one summer when I sat down with an incoming freshman. I was looking over his fall schedule and I was pumping him up about how great his classes looked. And I asked if he had any questions, and he thought for a minute. And then finally he said, I am wondering about this whole being treated as an adult thing. What do they mean when they say that? And I jumped into, oh, you know, it's really great. You are now the owner of your academic record, which means that you're in charge of selecting your classes and you're in charge of your grades, and who you share them with it's really up to you. You're going to have the opportunity to be making a lot of your own decisions. And I could tell as I was talking that his face was dropping and he was looking more and more nervous. And I said to him, was there a specific concern that you have? And he paused and he said, well, you know, to be honest, I don't really want to be treated like an adult. So I'm wondering what I can do so that that doesn't have to happen. And I was really taken aback. I was surprised that that was where he was at. But, you know, for some students, they will take a look at what they've got going at home and they will decide that that's a pretty good gig, right? Someone's maybe taking care of all of their needs and doing their laundry and planning meals for them. And really, you know, their only focus has had to be school or activities or whatever it is that they do. So I was able to talk to this student for a while, and we talked through some of his concerns, and I think he felt better afterwards. But just know that even if you may not be expecting that from your student, this could be something that they're a little bit nervous about. And this could be a good conversation to have with them before the fall, to really think about how they can be ready for that and how you can support them kind of from afar. Okay, so some other things that you can do, really creating those opportunities for independence before the fall, so before they get here. And that might be just little things like making sure that they know how to do their own laundry. If they need a doctor's appointment before the fall, they call and they get that set up and they stick it on the calendar and they're responsible for getting themselves there. Anytime there's an opportunity for decision making, allowing them to make that decision and stepping back as a parent and saying, okay, well, what do you think you should do, can be a great way to create these opportunities and get them ready for the fall. You can also talk about the university's expectations with them. You really want to support their independence and change. And then one of our really, really top tips is to set those limits on the cell phone help. So for anyone who might be of the same generation as me, you know that when we were this age, if we ran into a problem, we didn't have, you know, a lifeline to parents, family members, loved ones to call for help, right? If, you know, I think back to when I was an undergrad at UCSB, if I found out that maybe, you know, I was with an academic advisor in a class I thought was going to count for graduation, you know, wasn't going to count for the requirement I thought, I had at least maybe 15, 20 minutes of walking back to my room, putting my stuff down, finding a phone and calling and complaining about that to a family member. But these days, our students can, you know, call or text immediately, and that can often set off a cycle that really creates a lot more emotion than it needs to. So if you receive one of those panicked calls from your student, our suggestion is that you say to them, wow, that sounds like a lot. I really want to be able to support you through this. I'm going to need to call you back in a few minutes. You can make up whatever excuse you want. There's someone at the door, I have to take the dog out, whatever it might be. And then hang up the phone, give it 15, 20 minutes. I know some of you would have to set a timer because it will be hard to sometimes when your student is so upset to stay away for that long, but give them 15 to 20 minutes and then call them back. And 9 times out of 10, that little bit of time for them to take a deep breath, to think about what's just happened, you will find a different student on the phone with you 15, 20 minutes later than you had when they initially called. And then you can start really helping them because the emotions have lowered. So now they're not, so emotional. You're not going to be so emotional. You can start with those open-ended questions. You can support the fact that they've been through a difficult situation. That sounds like it's really tough. What do you think you can do? Is there someone on campus who might be able to help you with this? Is there an office that you could go visit to discuss this issue? Have you thought about, contacting a professor or something like that? You can start asking those open-ended questions rather than just giving that unsolicited advice of what they need to do. And that's where we get into that empowerment versus problem solving. We also really encourage you to encourage your students to utilize our first year programs and our courses. So we do offer a course for freshmen. It's called Education 20. It's offered in the spring. It's just for freshmen. It's really about helping them understand the research institution, what are the programs and departments and student services that are here for them? How can they take best advantage of that? How can they use their time at the university to their advantage? And particularly if you have a freshman who's struggled a bit through their first year, getting them to take this class in spring would be particularly helpful for them. And the other thing you might want to think about is your phrasing when you're speaking with them and how that may influence their level of independence. So statements like, I really trust you to make a good decision in this situation will be very empowering for your student. Or I know you can figure this one out, will build their confidence in being able to manage their own problems and find their own solutions. One of the things that I think with this generation of high schoolers, college students, is that they're very, very good at following directions. They've had a lot of experience with that over their course of their education up to this point. They're very good at looking to adults for what to do next. And now they're becoming adults. So we need to be able to empower them to know what to do, right? So that they can be there for the next generation. And so this is part of it in their first year of college. All right, let's talk a little bit about homesickness. So I really hope that your student is not homesick. Homesickness is not only difficult for the person going through it, but it can be particularly difficult as a loved one to watch your student go through being homesick. So the interesting thing, if you look at the research on homesickness, homesickness has nothing to do with distance from home. So if you're worried just because you live 3,000 miles away, that doesn't necessarily tell you whether or not your student's going to be homesick. Homesickness has more to do with how different a place is from where you're used to being. And that can be everything from the climate, the food, the people, the social norms and expectations. All of those different things can cause bits of homesickness. So you really want to make sure that you listen and be supportive as you can. And this will be one of the harder things, but we strongly encourage you to encourage them to stay at UCSB on the weekends. So what tends to happen when we see students who are homesick is they are sitting in their room, maybe not branching out and meeting new people. They're feeling very homesick because things are really different. They're not so sure if they've made a good decision about being here. And then if they go home for the weekend, they have a temporary reprieve from that, but it makes it that much harder to come back after the weekend is over. Because the weekends tend to be when students have a little bit more time to sit and talk and meet each other and invite each other out to do various things around campus or in our local community. And, you know, they start to have inside jokes and little funny things that have happened over the weekend. And if you've missed all of that and then you come back to it, it can actually be even more alienating, realizing that you now are not even a part of those pieces. So really, as hard as it may be, try and encourage them to stay here on the weekends. If your student is really, really struggling and you just think, oh my gosh, I have to do something, the best thing you could do, if it's feasible for you, is to come visit them here. So tell them, okay, you know what? I'm going to come out to Santa Barbara for the weekend and we will spend a little bit of time together. And it's really amazing how many students who have been, I mean, I have seen this many times, so homesick for so long, family members come to visit them and they spend the weekend showing them around campus. This is where I eat. This is where my English class is. This is where my math class is. Oh, I like going to the recreation center. I work out over there. And somehow that process of showing their family around actually convinces them that they like it here at UCSB. And by the time their family leaves, they have sort of a renewed commitment to being here and a new kind of understanding of, okay, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe there are things that I like about this place, particularly if their family members are really supportive when they're saying those things too and saying, oh yeah, this looks great. And oh my gosh, I love that classroom. I would love to take a class there, or whatever it might be, can kind of pump them up. I know that, you know, for some of them, living with a roommate, or in many cases, they may be living with 2 or more roommates, that could be a new experience for them, having to share space, navigating different schedules, different living habits. So they will probably at some point call home and complain about 1 or more of their roommates. And, you know, it may be very tempting as a family member to really support them in that and say what a terrible person their roommate is. But if you can, you know, hold yourself back from that and really just listen, and again, ask those open-ended questions, you know, how do you think that person feels? What do you think you might do about that? Is there anyone in the residence hall who might be able to help you out, or who you could talk to about this? You know, knowing and understanding that that roommate probably at some point will be calling home and complaining about your student as well, and that they all will have to work it out, and they do work through it. And then finally, encouraging utilization of services. There's a lot of programming that happens in the residence halls. You know, if they're not feeling connected to their particular roommates, it would be a great idea to go and participate in some of that programming that's going on in the residence halls. It's really low risk. You know, you can show up by yourself and you're almost guaranteed to get connected to someone. So really, really encourage them to do that. Okay, we're going to move on and talk about a couple of important conversations that we want you to have with your students before they get here. Or if you do have a student who's already here doing summer start, this might be a conversation that you could have with them at some point over the phone if you haven't had a chance yet. And that's managing their emotional and their mental health on the one hand, and then also talking about choices around alcohol and drugs. So let's first talk about their choices around alcohol and drugs. It is important to realize that your student will be affected by alcohol and drug use, whether or not they choose to participate. So even if this is not something that is a value or a life choice for them, they will know people who are making those choices, and they will probably be impacted by that. Many of them are very aware of their peers' use of alcohol and drugs, and they are aware that UCSB does have a reputation as a party school, and that is something that we see our freshmen be really concerned with. I think it's good news that they are concerned about this. It means they take it seriously, It means that this is not something that they want to be part of the value of their community. And, you know, it means that they can actually live their values and stand up for their right to a positive environment. So one of the things that we are most concerned with, and I know that the alcohol and drug program came to speak with you during your student services presentation, but one of our top concerns, of course, are the high-risk behaviors, the binge drinking, which tends to be a national problem among college students, and the tendency for some students to mix alcohol with other drugs or with prescribed medications, not realizing that how dangerous and detrimental that can be to their health. So there are a few things that you can do, not only to have this conversation with them, but also to model for them how to make positive choices. One is frequently asking about their nightlife, what they do for fun, and their awareness of alternative non-alcohol centered events and involvements that they might be part of. Because if you find that they can't think of any, just know that they're not looking, because there are plenty on campus. I mean, the campus calendar and the list of events on Shoreline, which I'm sure you've heard about Shoreline, it's our online student engagement platform, is endless. There are tons of things for them to do that do not involve the party scene. So if they call home and tell you that that's all there is to do here, just know that that is absolutely not true, and they need to start looking for some other ways to get involved. It's also really important to discuss moderation with them. I think there are some families who shy away from this conversation in favor of more of the, we just, you know, don't condone this at all. But it is helpful to talk to students about if they were ever to choose to do this and to participate, or if you are a family who is more comfortable with them participating in this aspect of college life, to talk about moderation. Talk about how they might set limits. Some things that we often suggest are that they think about before they go out, how they may respond if it's offered to them, if they choose to partake, how much they're comfortable with in terms of, you know, either the number of drinks they're going to have, or if they were to participate in the drug scene, what that might look like in terms of their boundaries and their limits. And to think about that before they go out, because if they think about that ahead of time, they'll be much more likely to stick with it. Similar to if they've had a conversation with you, they understand your expectations, your family values in this area, they're much more likely to stick to that when they are confronted with that situation. We also would encourage you to discuss any family history you have of addiction. So we have known students who have found themselves overindulging in this area and getting into trouble, and then later finding out that actually, you know, alcoholism runs in their family and they never knew. And they get really upset about that because they feel as though had they known, they may have made some different choices. So if you have not had the chance to share that with your student, that might be a part of your family history, this now would be a very good time to tell them as well. I would also really discourage you from glamorizing any of your own alcohol and drug use. And I know it can be tempting if you had, you know, a fun college experience, you know, with a beer bong or something like that, to want to share that with them at this point in their life. But I think it's important to recognize that particularly incoming freshmen are very, very impressionable around this area. They will not fully know what the expectations are or the norms are in college. And so they will be looking to others to tell them. And if you are glamorizing your own use in college, they will see that as the norm and the expectation. So I'm not saying that you never can share that with them, but, you know, coming into college freshman year is maybe not the best time. You might want to wait until they're a little bit older and have navigated this situation a little bit more on their own before you start sharing those stories with them. It's also important to know and notice the signs of a problem, which, you know, are things like their grades are dropping, they are spending a lot of money, they're not sleeping, they're sleeping too much, signs of depression, they're not socializing with friends, or they're socializing too much with friends. Those types of things can all be an indication that they might be struggling. And finally, avoiding giving them too much spending money. So someone will always ask me during this presentation, how much is too much? And that's not really a question that we can answer for you. That's certainly up to you as you know, whatever your family situation is. But I will tell you that it is not the students who are having to work 30 hours a week to put themselves through school who tend to have issues around alcohol and drug use. It's just not. They don't have time and they don't have the money for it. So if this is an area of concern for you, one of the things that you can do is avoid giving them excess spending money. It's always easier to increase the amount of money that you're giving them rather than try to take it away at some point. And then lastly, encouraging your student to stand up for a positive environment. So that could be within their living situation, you know, or in their friend group. If there are folks who are, you know, really have different values and are struggling with alcohol and drug use, and it is beginning to impact your student, encourage them to say something and to seek some help. And that's another place that our alcohol and drug program can be very helpful. You know, they take referrals and they're there, you know, for any student who wants to call for some advice or some counseling or just, you know, some general, I just need to process what's going on. They are certainly available for students to do that. And then one other thing that I want to say about this topic is just thinking about, as a society, and this is really, you know, just as an American society, we tend to celebrate accomplishments and deal with stress through the use of particularly alcohol, right? And so one thing I would encourage you to think about is how you may or may not be expressing that to your student and how you may be able to express some better choices for them. So, you know, if you think about it in society, often, you know, if there's something to celebrate, there's champagne or, you know, going out to happy hour or something like that to celebrate an accomplishment. Similarly, you see it in movies, on TV, just in our general culture. Someone's very stressed out, they've had a hard day, they pour themselves a glass of wine. And if you imagine being 17, 18, 19 years old, and you're just now learning as a new adult how you are going to deal with stress and how you're going to celebrate accomplishments, and those are the messages that are constantly coming in, it really shouldn't be that much of a surprise to us that that's what we see our students do. So I know this will sound a little bit hokey, but what we would encourage you to do is to really vocalize some of the healthy, positive ways that you celebrate accomplishment and deal with stress. So it could be something as easy as just naming the things that you already do. You know, maybe you exercise to deal with stress, or you call a friend and go for a walk or something like that. Well, not just modeling doing that, but also vocalizing to your student, yeah, you know, I called Marianne yesterday because I was feeling really stressed out and I wanted to go for a walk with a friend, and I knew that that would help me feel better. That's a very positive message that you can send to your student about how to deal with stress that does not involve alcohol, right? Similarly, if you're celebrating something, you know, maybe it's a, you know, I was so excited, I, you know, went and I got my nails done, or I, you know, I decided to celebrate by treating myself to that extra dessert at the restaurant instead of really having it be a focus on alcohol. Just new ways of constantly getting those positive messages out to our students can be really helpful. Secondly, conversation around emotional and mental health and ways that you can help. So for some college students, they have already been, you know, dealing with throughout much of their life some type of, you know, mental health issue. Maybe they've struggled with anxiety, maybe they've struggled with depression, maybe they have struggled with, you know, with some type of other disorder. And if that's the case, they probably already have some skills and some coping skills. And, you know, they might need some help really continuing those healthy skills. but they might not have to learn new ones. Whereas other students will be experiencing this as something completely new. Maybe they've never dealt with depression, but they get here and they're super homesick, and maybe UCSB wasn't quite what they expected, or they might be feeling like they're drowning in their classes. And that's a new experience because they've always done so well in school. And they may not have those coping skills built up from the past. So a few things that you can do. Number one, again, you want to vocalize those healthy ways of dealing with stress, the work-life balance, focus on exercise, eating healthy, getting enough sleep. We talk with students a lot about what we call sleep hygiene, right? Getting enough rest, utilizing those resources on campus. UCSB Health and Wellness actually has a sleep challenge where they get students to track their sleep and they work on ways that they can get better sleep. So helping them get involved in that would be great. Never sparing your student from a family reality or a family change. So over the course of the next 4 years or however long they're here, things are going to happen. It could be a job loss. It could be, someone could get sick. There could be an accident. The dog could die. And often we will see families want to not share that information with their student because they don't want to distract them from their studies. But what we found is that actually can be much worse for your student than just telling them and letting them figure out their coping strategy. So I'll share a story from when I was in college. My roommate received a letter from her mom that was a very nice letter. It had all these wonderful things, had, newspaper clippings that were about the high school football team and all sorts of great stuff. And at the bottom, she signed it, "Love, Mom." And then it said, "P.S. Your dog Blondie died last week and I buried her in the backyard. Just wanted you to know." And she was livid. She was very, very upset about the fact that her mom had not told her, A, that the dog had not been doing well, and B, that, she had waited over a week to tell her that her dog had died. And many of you have probably gone through grief in the past. It can be particularly difficult as an important immediate family member if you don't find out at the same time everybody else does, to try and jump into that sea of grief when you are now in a different place than everybody else and have that additional piece of being upset that nobody told you. So please do share with them. Let them know that you will support however they need to cope, including, if they needed to take some time off from school. There's no shame in taking an incomplete in a class if that's what you need to do, or, dropping out for the quarter or taking the quarter off. We have students do that all the time and they recover from it and they still graduate and on track and they do well. And sometimes they just need that break or that support. So please support them in that if that is something that they need to do. Please encourage them to reach out to mental health services if that is something that they need. We have both counseling services and our mental health coordinators who can help a student get directed to what might be the best place for them. Also, if you as a parent or family member have concerns about your student, reaching out to the mental health coordinators is a great place to start. They are a non-confidential resource, so they are actually able to reach out to your student if that's something that you would like them to do. Whereas some of our other services that are confidential are not able to do that outreach. So they are a great resource. Similarly, if they are dealing with some type of long-term issue, registering again with that Disabled Students Program and getting those services. And then finally, as I know that you've heard over the course of your 2 days of orientation, there are a number of student privacy laws that really restrict the university from sharing information with parents. And the one kind of caveat loophole that we have with that is that if there is a serious concern for health and safety, we are allowed to break that confidentiality. And it does have to be a very serious concern with health and safety. But if we were to reach out to you, please believe us, because we are now at the point where it is a very serious situation and we would not be calling you if it wasn't. So we have had parents in the past not take us all that seriously. Oh yeah, no, we're not that concerned. Just talked to him yesterday. I think he's fine. We would not be calling if it wasn't at this point already a pretty big concern. And lastly, we have put up the student parent liaison email there for you, sa-student-parent-liaison@ucsb.edu, in case you ever need it. And this would be something like if your student were to go through, were to get hurt or something like that, and we're not able to, take care of their academic issues or something like that, the student parent liaison could be of assistance for you. Okay. So fitting in and finding friends. This is definitely, if we were to ask your students, what are you most concerned about? This is the topic that would probably be coming to mind for them. They're probably feeling pretty confident about being able to manage school. They've done it for 13 years now with kindergarten through 12th grade. But getting here, being in a new environment, making new friends is definitely going to be something that will be of concern to them. And they will spend the majority of the year kind of going through this process of trying to figure out how they can fit in. So for some of them, they might have a pretty big culture shock coming here. And that could be the fact that, based on where they're coming from, the population of UCSB may look really different. The students who go here may look really different than what they're used to. It could be that it's the beach Southern California vibe, that if they didn't grow up in that type of environment, that could be a little bit of a culture shock for them. I had a student who worked for me quite a few years ago now, but he was from a tiny little mountain town in Northern California. And he was telling me about how he got here on the first day and he was wearing jeans, a flannel shirt, and hiking boots. And he was looking around and noticing that there were all these people on his hall who were wearing board shorts and flip-flops and tank tops. And he just thought to himself, wow, I'm not in Kansas anymore. And he didn't even own a pair of open-toed shoes. He was telling me that where he was from, you just wouldn't wear open-toed shoes. It wasn't safe. You could get hurt. So he really had to adapt to that culture. And you'll be happy to know that by the time he was talking to me, as he was telling me this, I was looking at him and he was wearing a tank top, board shorts, and flip-flops. So they do all at some point kind of assimilate into the culture. Some of them will be having a significant other from high school or from this summer that they are carrying over into their time in college. And, this will impact them in many ways. Number one, they may spend more time, coming back home or going to, if their significant other goes to another campus that's commutable, they may drive to see their significant other on the weekend. And that may prevent them from making some connections here. Or maybe they spend a bunch of time on the phone with their significant other and then they're not spending as much time with their new hallmates. But often what happens is they get here and they kind of look around and they realize that, wow, there are a lot of fish in the sea, right? And it gets a little bit more challenging. Long distance relationships are hard. And often it's right around the time of Thanksgiving that they start to realize that maybe this relationship is not working out. And that is so common that we have actually coined a term for this phenomenon. We call it the turkey drop. And that is the technical term for them going home at Thanksgiving and breaking up with their high school or summer relationship that they've been in that carried over into college. And don't be too surprised if they may pick that turkey up a couple of times and drop it a couple of times before that relationship has finally come to a close. But it does happen to most students who try and maintain a relationship into their time in college. So just be aware of that. It can be, particularly if this was their first love or first relationship, can be very, very emotional for them and put, just a little bit of additional strain onto their adjustment to college. So just something to know about and be aware of. Social media, this particular generation, this is how they live through social media. It's how they connect with each other. And that's great, but we do try and remind them to get out there and make those real in-person live connections as well. And for many of them, they may also spend some time trying on a new self. At this particular age, that is a very natural thing to do. They're figuring out who they are, who they want to be. They will be, sort of newly minted adults as they come into college. And again, they're going to have some ideas in their head about what that means and what may be, the person to be at this moment. So your meat and potato loving son may come home and announce that now he is a vegan, right? Or, they may try on a new political persuasion, or they might come home with some additional hardware in various places, or a tattoo or something like that. And these are all things that, that are normal for them to do as they figure out who they are and who they want to be. So some ways that you can help. One is reminding them that relationships and friendships take time and they take effort. So one of the things that we tend to see happen sometimes is they get here on move-in day and they're very excited and they're nervous. And the first 5 people that they see, they form a group. We are friends, right? We are a friend group and we are going to do everything together. So they go to every meal together, they walk to class together, they go to the bookstore together, everything they do is together. And next thing you know, they are signing a lease to live in an off-campus apartment next year, together, right? And then winter quarter rolls around and it's now been 15 weeks or so that they've known each other and tensions are getting a little high. And all of a sudden your student may look at these people and realize, wow, I don't even like them, right? And now they feel stuck because they look around and they think everybody else, has their group of friends, and how are they ever going to break into a new group, and how will they ever make new friends? So if you see this happening, one of the things that you can do is encourage them not to put all of their eggs in one basket. That yes, it's wonderful they've made a new group of friends, but how about also joining a club or organization, taking an 8 to 10 to 15 hour on-campus job where they might meet some different people, going to those residence hall programs where they might meet some folks who live on, a different hallway or a different floor than them, and making sure that they're trying to grow that social network a little bit so that if it doesn't work out with those initial friends, they don't have to feel so alone. They may also be experiencing that new reality of meeting a lot of people who are very different from them. Hey, they have grown up with different values. They've grown up with different circumstances. And that can, challenge the young mind sometimes in trying to understand their peers. So if they're struggling with that, really helping them to understand that, different is okay. It's just different and that's okay. And they will learn a lot from meeting folks who are different from them, and that's something that will only enhance their education. I know that they've had these conversations probably for most of their lifetime at this point, but you would be surprised at how many students don't seem to understand the long-term consequences for their online postings and their social media choices. So it may be time just to have that conversation once again before they, walk into college and make some choices that they aren't happy with long-term. And then, if any of their new self changes are of concern to you, or you're happy about them, we really encourage you to communicate about that change and really let them know how you feel about it and what your values are, and realize that most students will come around. They will come back in line with the values that they've grown up with, but they may take some time to kind of press on those values a little bit and test those boundaries a bit while they're in college. All right. So other ways that you can help. One thing you can do is to encourage them to get involved. So they will probably tell you at first that they're a little bit overwhelmed. It will be overwhelming to start classes, to be living in a new residence hall, to be meeting new roommates. And maybe they're not ready to get involved day one. We will have a registered org fair for them during the week of welcome. Encourage them to go. And even if they're not ready to join, maybe they just look around and then find some different things that they might be interested in, so that when they do start to feel a little bit more settled, they can start reaching out and joining things. And finding things that really align with their interests. There are professional organizations, there are social organizations, there are volunteer organizations. Pretty much anything that your student likes to do. They like to dance, they like to play chess, they like to play soccer, whatever it is they might like to do. There's going to be a club or organization or team that they can join. And it's a really important part of their success here to get connected and to have a co-curricular life, because that will actually support them doing better in their academics and give them really the full experience of being here at UCSB. If they are struggling, if they go on Shoreline, they really can't figure it out, they can't figure out how to get involved, encourage them to come stop by student engagement and leadership. And our staff over here can help your student, they can help them pinpoint what are they interested in. Here are some organizations you might want to think about. And then finally, we are, a fully 100% anti-hazing organization, and we just want all students and family members to know that everyone has the right to join an organization in a very positive and supportive way. So, it doesn't happen often, but if you were to notice that they have joined an organization and there are any changes in their behavior, such as sleep habits or how they have to dress or their communication or spending habits, or they're just a little bit cagey about telling you what's going on, these can be warning signs of hazing, and we hope that you will encourage them to report that to the university. You can also report that to the university as well. There is an online reporting form, so please be aware of that. So just in conclusion, I want to say that your students are, they're in for a very big journey. It's going to be an incredibly positive experience for them. It is for most students, even though they may struggle with some of these different issues that we talked about. I always get the question, are you going to do this presentation for the students? And the answer is no. They do get much of this information in a format that's geared for them. But if we were to let them listen to this, often what they would hear is, I'm going to get bad grades, I'm going to break up with my significant other, and my dog is going to die, right? And that's not the message that we want to send to them. The message we want to send to them is that they have all of the abilities and capabilities to successfully navigate UCSB and get through it, and that we're here to help them and support them. And you as parents and family members are really an essential piece of that. You will get them there. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I hope you've had a wonderful orientation. We look forward to welcoming you whenever you come to campus, whether you are moving your student in the fall, or if you're coming to Parents and Family Weekend, or if we don't see you until commencement. We will look forward to welcoming you here to campus. So thank you for your time. This concludes your orientation. You can leave the webinar now, and if you do have any questions that you would like to ask, you are welcome to use the Q&A function, and Kathleen and I will sit for a few more minutes and answer any last questions that you have. So enjoy, congratulations, and congratulations to your student. Thank you.